You're listening to Northern Runes Radio. Thanks for tuning in. We're glad you came along with us today. On our shows, we attempt to grapple with the questions relating to the nature of consciousness in our modern world as seen through the lens of Asatruar, the pre-Christian spiritual belief system of our Northern European ancestors. By knowing where we come from, by having that connection to who we are, we can make a course forward to build our lives in a way that brings honor and truth not only to our people but to the world around us. You are listening to Northern Runes Radio.
Hail and welcome to each and every one of you who are subscribers through RSS or through iTunes, or who are streaming on the YouTube channel or on our main podcast server site. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. Our podcast server site, which is kind of like a blog with a player at the end of it, is nrr.podbean.com. And, of course, our main website, which you can listen to the broadcasts through streaming and downloading, and also take a look at playlists of interviews, is at northernrunesradio.com. So please make sure you visit that and take a look and enjoy all the things that are there. We are also going to be resuming on Tuesday our SoundCloud lore readings. So we're going to have that on the air as well. So we hope that you're enjoying this. We've gone through the runic series up to the point where we have ended off where the Elder Futhark ends. And before going on, because there are more runes to talk about, as we go on, there's less and less that we're going to be able to really focus on because the lore becomes less and less. The very last runes of the Anglo-Saxon Futhark, we actually don't have any lore on at all. I will talk about those a little bit, but we want to get on to other things as well. We're going to be talking today about why we teach the esoteric. I think that's an important topic for us to discuss right now at this point, just giving a moment of pause. And after we get through the rest of the runic series, we'll be talking about a few things that are coming up. Of course, Ostara is going to be coming up in the next few months. We're going to have a lot of positive and powerful things going on. But we're going to also be talking as this year progresses, as I said in an earlier broadcast, about the art of magic called Scythe, and also about bind runes and how you can actually start to practically use the runes and practical workings. What we've been talking about up till now is the mere foundation. Okay, and you know, this is by no means the sum and total of the esoteric side of our ways and the ways of our ancestors. This is merely the foundation, because if you are not aware of your soul complex, if you are not aware of the energies that the runes represent, if you are not aware of the different aspects of the multiverse, then what good are they to you? Because you don't have any consciousness of them. So you have to have a foundation. If you're building a house, or if you're building a large building, you need to have a foundation. Otherwise, the first big wind that comes along is going to knock the thing over, and everything you did is for nothing. You know, you need to build that awareness. But, you know, the question rises because, of course, you know, some might ask, why don't you just talk about the religion or spiritual philosophy of Asatruar? You know, talk about the gods and the myths, and talk about the sagas and the stories and the traditions, and we certainly do, and we will continue to do so. But why not just focus on that and forget about all this esoteric stuff? Well, we have some very good reasons, and what I believe to be powerful reasons, for delving into the esoteric and for putting it out there for people. All right? Because, you know, we're not just randomly putting this stuff together. One thing that is true is that Tierson and myself, or if there is somebody else that's on the show, we don't sit down and talk about what we're going to be doing on the show prior to recording. We may have a topic that we have put forth out there and said, okay, we're going to talk about this or about that, but neither one of us knows what the other person is going to really say beforehand.
Yeah. And I just found out an hour ago about the topic of this show, so this is going to be interesting, just like every other show is. But I think the spontaneity of these shows really gives our listeners that full-on effect of the fact that we're real, and that this is coming from our hearts, and that's coming from, you know, the depths of ourselves, because I can definitely feel that on some of those shows, especially the runic episodes that we've done. And I can't stress how much Asatruar means to us, and how much we're willing to go, and how much we're willing to do to make sure that the voice of our folk soul, the voice that has called us here, that it's heard by our listeners. So just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. And I didn't even know that I was going to be talking about this subject myself until a meditation that I was undergoing probably about 1 o'clock in the morning. So this is something that is completely unscripted, and I would say that aside from some of our interviews, some, not all, I might add, everything that you hear on the NRR, Northern Runes Radio, is unscripted and off the cuff. Okay? So we're real people talking to real people. And we leave our little screw-ups and tongue-twisting Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. I still can't say that one quite right. We leave it on there because you know what? We're not sitting in a polished tower looking out over a river while we don't know anything that's going on with regular folk. We are just like you. We have a burden on our hearts. But why do we teach the esoteric? Why? Why bother going into that? After all, we're in an age where, we know that magic doesn't exist. We know that, energy isn't real. Although scientists will tell you otherwise. Why is it that we bother? Well, I see, and there are many more reasons than this, 3 major reasons. And, of course, there's the classic public speaker going, yes, the 3 major reasons. Yes, I do admit it. When they taught me public speaking when I was in seminary, they always talked about the 3 points. But you know what? There's a reason for that, and I'm going to explain that to you right now just before we get into the meat of things, and that is that if you were sitting in a lecture theater right now, and I was sitting here giving a lecture to you about what we're going to talk about today, about 2 to 3 hours after you left that lecture hall, your mind would retain approximately 20%, if that, of anything that I'd said. You would lose 80% at least, okay, in one ear, out the other. And that's just part of the way human beings are, okay? If you watched and heard, more than one aspect of bringing that information in, you might retain a little bit more. Perhaps you would only lose 60 to 70%. That's a little bit better. Still not great. If you were to listen and then actively engage what was going on, that drops your loss of memory of what was going on down to about 35%. Okay? Now, that's quite an interesting thing, isn't it? And people get different statistics from different places, but that, the more avenues through which, that's why we have so many platforms that are out there. You're streaming, you're listening, okay? You're listening if you are on RSS or iTunes, okay? On YouTube, you can go on there and you can see nice little pictures and you can listen, and you can also have some sort of visual stimulus, because we try to put some things on there that are of a relationship to what we're talking about. Not throughout the whole thing, but you see it pop up there at key points. For instance, if we're talking about a rune, you'll see that rune that we're talking about pop up more than once on the broadcast. Different aspects. We have had different seminars that have taken place. I know here in Edmonton, where I have lectured in a hall, and there have been, of course, the things that I've said. There's also been notebooks there where people can read and follow along, also with blank spaces for them to write things out that dawn on them as they're listening. And so that engagement process is there. And so we want you to be able to have the most out of what you get here. And the reason for that is because of the times we live in. We need to really delve into the traditions of our ancestors and the things that we bring into the 21st century and make them real in our lives today, and not just allow all these things to slip away from us. Okay? The first reason we teach about the esoteric, okay, and we teach about the exoteric or the religious side of things too, but the reason number one for the esoteric or the magical way is that every religion that has ever existed upon this earth, and I do dislike the term religion, spirituality is a much better term, I think, but, you know, whether it be the ways of our ancestors, whether it be the ways of the Native Americans, whether it be the way of the Aborigines in Australia, whether it be even Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, whether it be Buddhism, whether it be the multitude of different religious belief systems that comprise Hinduism, whether it be Taoism, whether it be any type of spiritual philosophy that exists out there, it proceeded from the esoteric. Okay? Before there was ever a priesthood, in tribal societies, there was the shaman who went into the cave or wherever he or she went to consult with the spirits. All right? And all of the different things that happened religiously took place as a result of the convictions and the processes that the people, not just the shaman, but the people themselves who respected that shaman, represented and what they did. Okay? We take a look at North American Indian culture. All right, you know, they used to ask the shaman which way the buffalo were going before they went on a hunt. All right? We take a look at let's take a look at one of the monotheistic religions, okay? We take a look at Judaism. What do they talk about? Do they talk about how, you know, the different stories lined up in a certain way that, you know, they all matched up, and yes, the priests... No, they talked about, first of all, you know, how their God spoke to Abraham. They talk about the parting of the Red Sea and the plagues of Egypt. They talk about the giving of the law on the mountain of God, where there was thunder and lightning and earthquakes. They talk about the 10 Commandments being written by the finger of God on the stone tablets. You know, was that academic? No, it was something that was a esoteric philosophy. And then the other aspects followed, you see. Now, also true, our way kind of has started ass backwards in the modern age. I'm not talking about in ancient times. You know, a lot of people very interested and very academic and, you know, wanted to know the history of our people and to rebuild the traditions of our ancestors as closely as they could. And, you know, we laud them for that because that's, I'm not downplaying that importance. There is a great important place for the intellectual and the person who has academic concern. It is not something I'm downplaying and saying is irrelevant. I'm saying that it is, but that's not the starting place. It's not what moves people's hearts and souls. Okay? If you want to touch people's hearts and souls and make a difference, because we got to take a look at the facts here. Our religion as a whole is actually quite small. We are not a vast number of people on the face of this earth. Okay? We don't even register. on most places. They don't even know what we are, unless you happen to live in Iceland. Okay, it's something that's not a large global movement. It's not something that, even where our folk are throughout the world, that they've even heard of us. All right, we're trying our best to do our part to change that. I know you may be trying your best to change that where you are, and we encourage and support that. That's why we have network partners that we put up on our station, like the Hugenhof Kindred. They have a podcast, and it's a really good one. But their esoteric, number one, was what everything else proceeded from. So obviously it had to have a great deal of importance. We take a look at, and Tirson and I were discussing this just before we went on the air, the cycles of the universe, and of course the cycles of empires. Okay, because there's been plenty of them on the earth. There's been the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire. How did they all start? Well, they had their period of conquest. Well, that was their period where they went out and they showed, their kahunas, and, they did this and they did that. Then there was a period of rule where they had their laws all set up and codified, and everybody there had to follow them according to a certain way. Then they had their period of decline where they started to fall into decadence, and they weren't even following their own rules anymore. And then they had the foreign power that came in and wiped them out or took them over. And we saw that pattern over and over again. And we see that in the cycles of nature as well. We see, how things are born, they live, and then they get old, and then they pass off out of this life. Okay, it's a cycle that things go through. What does that mean for us in terms of Asatruar, to the traditions of our ancestors? Are we going to start off, presenting to the world that which is already at the point of death? Or are we going to stir the hearts and souls of people? Okay, that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons we talk about the esoteric. Okay, and I think it's an important reason. Is it the only reason? No. The second reason, and I think it's just as important, is that the pathway of personal evolution is a mirror reflection of the collective evolution of our people. So if we are expanding our consciousness, and not everybody is going to be called forth to study the esoteric, but because we are connected to one another, even for those that are not, for those that are, and move forward and attain something that is, valuable, to regain something that is powerful, it does, because of that connection, affect the entire folk soul of our people and cause other things to happen, such as the attraction of people to remember the ways and the traditions of their people, because there's something to it. There's a reality that's there. All right? Without that reality, what use is it? Okay? Tradition, for the sake of tradition. All right? Some people will say, oh, I have no problem with that. Tradition for the sake of tradition? I would question that. I would question it because that tradition might be so culturally entrenched in the time period in which it was performed that it has no relevance to us in the modern world. How are your children going to react to that? All right? Are they going to want to wave spears and swords, or are they going to play with their iPhone? All right? But if it's a tradition that has a reality that actually is a connection or a connection point to the gods, to the ancestors, to the runes, to the ways of our people and who we really are, how much force does that have? All right? Multiply it by 10, 100, 1,000. Because that's where self-identity comes from, I believe. You know, and pride in one's self-identity. So we teach the esoteric for those reasons. Tirsa, do you have anything to add to these 2 points as I've been doing all the talking here today?
That's fine. Yeah, I have something to add. Basically, growing up, you have all this stuff from like the kids' books and whatnot when it comes to learning about spirits and trolls and elves. A lot of it's entrenched in fairy tale, and you got like the stories of Grimm and whatnot. And as a child, my imagination was so connected and so driven by these forces of the collective, the forces of the collective and the society that I was brought up in, and what was okay reading for our parents to pick up books. You don't want to be reading your 2-3-year-old child the Tibetan Book of the Dead or something like that. So we had our little kids' books and whatnot, and I just remember at a young age just playing in my imagination with these spirits, with these ideas, with these concepts. And I don't care how like anybody really wants to take it as, it's just a psychological thing. Spirits don't exist. Well, regardless if you think they do or they don't, they still have a principle in the mind. And they do have a psychological principle because they've existed for that long. And I look at it like they're mediums, just like the runes, just like the Alfar, just like the gods and the goddesses and the mythologies and the initiation processes, for one person to one understanding of consciousness into another. Just like for most people, they have a lucid dream before an out-of-body experience, or an out-of-body experience before an astral projection, and then astral projections that are not willfully controlled necessarily, delving into the collective archetypes, whatever occult or esoteric practice that they're dealing with, until it is a willful, controlled, lucid experience, right? So, there's initiation processes and all this, and to say that the astral plane doesn't exist, or an out-of-body experience doesn't exist, or the ethereal body doesn't exist, that's totally fine. Like, we're not here trying to tell you what to believe, but having had experiences with such things, it leads me into the understanding that the esoteric deals with the archaic mind. Of course, when you talk about what was first, we have the understanding that there was from mouth to ear, from student to teacher, and that's why in a lot of all these esoteric practices, esoteric orders, you have the initiation from master to disciple, and you have that understanding, the understanding and the collective understanding of that order or that group or that religion. I know we hate to use that, but it gets passed on from teacher to student, right? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And you have these sayings throughout all occult, esoteric practices. I just want to keep using the occult because it's hidden, just hidden secret knowledge. And esotericism very much deals with that occult element as well, because a lot of people are just not ready in their lives to come to an understanding of the esoteric, to deal with their inner psychology, to deal with lucid dreams, to deal with astral projection experiences, to deal with the initiatory experiences that are hidden in the tradition that they belong to. In many cases, we talk about belonging to a folk tradition. Right? Once we talk about, here's the Indo-European, the Northern European tradition, and we're teaching that, we're reviving its esoteric elements and its occult, you could say occult elements when it comes down to the runes and using the runes and save and practicing save with the runes and vision magic and shamanism and getting into the deep inner psychology of who you are, where you came from, your thought, your memory, from the archaic mind to this point, what your will is, where do we go from here? Right?
And there's something else that needs to be understood here with this, and this is, again, part of the second reason that I was talking about here, the personal evolution and how that affects everybody else, even those that have not elected to follow that path. Okay, first of all, the word occult, and that's a word that Tierson has used quite often. Let me demystify that word for you. Okay, forget about all the crap that comes out of Hollywood when it comes to occult. Okay, or what your minister told you or whatever when you were a child, if you came from Christianity before you came to Asatruar. Forget about all of that, because that word just means secret.
Yeah, like really.
Okay, it's just more. Like, let's take another Christian term, righteousness. People have mystified that word, You say somebody is filled with righteousness. Well, immediately you see the golden halo over their head in your mind's eye, and they're wearing white robes. No, what it basically means is that they were right. Okay, that's what the word means. Okay, what does the word rune mean?
Mystery.
It comes from the word runa,
hidden,
and the word means secret. Okay. So if the word occult means secret and the word runa or rune means secret, all right, and that depends on what region you're from. Some it's rune, spelled R with a accent over it, N, means secret. Okay. Then you've just said the same thing.
Yeah, you could basically say that the runes are an occult practice.
That's their definition.
Exactly.
Okay. And, like I said in the first reason that we've talked about why we teach esoteric things, okay, is that every spiritual philosophy that has ever been known to man, and I have yet in my entire life to have somebody prove to me and show to me otherwise, proceeded from esotericism or occultism or something to do with, the other world, whether it be the shaman preceding the priest. All right? And there are some people that are out there that are very well read, and I know that you will, if you look into that, find that what I'm saying is not inaccurate. And so, what is the purpose for teaching the esoteric? Well, first of all, in the second aspect of things, for personal evolution, it's to learn the secrets of the multiverse. Now, many people have the idea that all the secrets of the multiverse are out there somewhere. You see, because we think dualistically. All right, we think of what's me and what's not me, my left hand and my right hand, what is within me, what is without me. We think in these dualistic terms. All right, you will never, and I repeat, never, find the answers to the deepest questions of your soul and spirit and your complex by looking out there. Because you know what? People have been calling out there for thousands of years, and nothing answers.
I was just going to say, all of those unanswered prayers, looking for some external force to bring the end to conflict, or some external force to, to save them from themselves, or something like that. And what you're saying, Warderson, I think people at this point, I know many of our listeners, they have a deep understanding of this, is that the going within process, and we teach, of course, what you've done with the meditation series, with the whole aspect of getting into non-thought. So much of the esoteric experience, and of course, Warderson, you're talking about when one goes through the experience of the esoteric, starts dealing with the meditation, starts dealing with the initiatory processes, starts to open themselves up to, say, working with the alpha, or working with the gods and the goddesses, and making more of who they are, becoming more than what they were. And of course, that's going to rub off. Like, you could talk about in the esoteric, how there's very much an understanding throughout all esoteric practices about the aura, about the spirit, about the soul body, growing the soul body, expanding your aura. How that can, as you're expanding, it can start affecting people. You know, Wojens and we've had talks many times when I could tell when you're meditating. I could tell when you're balanced. I can tell when something's going on with you. It's an aura. It's a sense that, you know, we're just more than this physical reality. That when you go into visions and you deal with symbols and you make that connection and you work with that energy willfully, you know, you are in your own evolution having an effect on the evolution of the collective around you. How that happens has been explained in books. I know that you know this book once. I keep forgetting the title, by Eliphas Levi. Or LFS Levi.
Transcendental Magic.
Transcendental Magic. And you know, we're not here to say, oh, go read, you know, all of these books and to not look at our own tradition, but there's a lot of understandings out there throughout a lot of different esoteric orders, because they're talking about very much the deep introspective realities that are hidden in your subconscious mind, if you want to put that, but in the deeper universe that's within you. And that's very much an esoteric saying, right, Williamson?
Yes, and you know, that saying, and just about every esoteric order or group, or doesn't matter what tradition they are, they're going to make this quote at some point or other. They're going to say, as it is above, so it is below. They always forget the last part of that quote. And it's a quote from, I believe it's the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, which is one of the cornerstones of Hermetic thought. And that is, as it is above, so it is below, that together they may accomplish the miracles of the one thing. All right? Now, this is the thing that we got to bear in mind here. You know, we look at a lot of different things that are from different regions and different groups, and yes, there are differences in approach. There are differences in reason. There are differences in language and the way that different folk souls communicate with source energy and with you know, their gods, because every group of people have ancestors or they wouldn't be here. They have heroes and they have gods, and we do too. And we talk mainly about our gods and goddesses, and we talk about our ways. That's why we've been belaboring the runes, because it's something that has been forgotten so much. You know, there's so many books out there, and they just look at the runes as a means of divination, and you could use them for that, but that's not what they were for. The vulva, or the, you know, the witch was the one that was sought out in the lore for divination more than anybody else. And, you know, you don't hear too much about that. You know, we do read in the Havamal the 18 spell songs of Woden right after he won the runes. Okay, they were tools of sorcery and tools of power, because they were the gateways, as has been said throughout the runic series, of the creative and destructive powers of the universe. And, you know, but they're not the only ones. Okay, you know, other people's ways are just as valid as ours. And if we start saying that we have the only corner on wisdom, then we're as guilty as the monotheists. Okay? We don't want to be in that position. You know, since when were our gods ever jealous? Okay? We read it directly in the Bible, where God is speaking to Moses when he gave the law. He said, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me, for I am a jealous God, and I will hate to the 4th generation those who disobey me." And that's right in the book of Exodus, if you want to read it. Okay? Our gods were never like that. You know, Odin wasn't jealous of Thor. Thor wasn't jealous of Frey. Frey wasn't jealous of Freya. In fact, it was a non-issue. They didn't expect you to honor one above the... You know, they honored Wodan as All-Father. And in some places, if you look in the history, way, way back, Tyr was actually honored over Odin. Okay? You know, we have different aspects of the lore. I remember And this is sort of glossed over in the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda, where Odin won the mead of inspiration. Okay, I'm diverging a little bit into the religious lore here. Okay, and it's said that Suttung, chased him to Asgard and said, he swore an oath on the holy ring, and broke his word. Who can trust his troth? Now, that was the premise for our episode called Understanding Odin, which, of course, we believe that you can trust Odin. However, there are many people who have asked questions about that because of the fact that he did break a sacred oath. And that was a big deal among our ancestors. But, you take a look at other sources, say the Saxo Grammaticus, and we read that on SoundCloud, and, when he won the mead of inspiration, all of the gods of the Aesir and the Vanir were incensed with wrath against Odin. And they actually dragged him to a Thingstead, and they outlawed him for 10 years. And set somebody else up as Lord of the Gods. And then after 10 years, he was reinstated, because they felt compassionate that 10 years had been enough. All right, so we take a look and we see the different things that are said in the lore. But we wouldn't have any concept of the power of the gods and the goddesses. We wouldn't have any concept of the relationship that we can have with them and with the Alfar, which our ancestors honored far more often than the gods, by the way. I will, as I said in a broadcast a long time ago, recommend this book called Elves, Wights, and Trolls by Kvedolf Gunderson, and it's spelled Kvedulf, I believe, Gundarson.
Elves, Wights, and Trolls will suffice in your Google search.
Yeah. But yeah, you'll find it. There's not too many books written on the Alfar, but that's a good one to read. And, what about the Deesir? How would you have a relationship with them? And yet, Winter Nights, we do honor to the Deesir. What about Desablot, which is coming up before too long? Honoring the Deesir. What happens on Mother's Night? Yule just passed. What do we do? On top of honoring Frigg, the Queen of the Gods, we honor the Deesir, the female ancestors. All right? What would all that mean without the esoteric? It would mean nothing.
It would have no foundation, Wodenson, and you were speaking about this at the beginning of this episode, is that you have to build a foundation. And if you want to have a foundation, wouldn't it be wise to have the lore, to have the mythologies, to have the esoteric, the deeper, I guess you could say, timeline of where things began, without our creation story, without the creation of the world tree? We wouldn't be able to place our correspondences. We wouldn't have an as above, so below, and the opportunity to have the miracle for the one thing. We wouldn't have the deeper intrinsic mind, and then our ability to go into it and to find ourselves within it, to become one with that, so that we can transcend the lesser to become the more, which is the hidden esoteric art of alchemy, which you can find in you can just type it in Wikipedia, but to read definitions about these things and to be an armchair theorist, to never engage in meditational practices on these symbolic, very deep, symbolic, archaic principles of the mind, and to never have a connection with them, to never grow your soul body, you'll never have the experiences necessary for yourself to build a connection with the deeper, I almost get lost for words here, but the deeper connection of who you are within the universe.
And, you'll never find, as I said at the beginning of this aspect of things here, you'll never find the answer by looking out there. Okay? You have to look within first. Okay? You have to go deep within yourself, because you cannot connect with what is apparently out there. unless you connect with that aspect of your consciousness, which comes through the awareness of your soul complex and the awareness of those energies within you as a human being and as a person of Northern European descent, if we're talking about the runes of Saïd, like we're talking about today, okay? If you don't have that connection established within, you know, that's the first step. Then you have nothing to connect with out there. All right? People have their eyes turned outward when they should have their eyes turned inward first, because this is the foundation of things. All right? If you're not aware of something, it does you no good. You cannot become aware of something that is a part of your deep inner soul if you don't go to your deep inner soul. You're not going to find the truth of your deep inner soul looking at somebody else. You're not going to find the truth of your deep inner soul by reading some book. You're not going to find the truth of your own inner soul by getting down on your knees and praying to some deity.
No.
All right? It is not that you won't have a connection and be able to communicate with the gods and to communicate with the Alfar and to communicate with the ancestors. But first of all, you have to find the connection point that is in your soul complex. And in the process of doing that, you are going to be facing your own inner demons, your own inner Yultons or Ettins. Things that are challenges for you to overcome.
Use the 9 Noble Virtues as a guideline to overcome those.
To overcome those. Because as you do that and build and forge those connections, then when you are realizing that the separation, and this is one of the final realizations that happens to a person when they become aware of what is within them, that separation of what is within and what is without is actually the greatest mind trick that there is, because there is no difference.
Yeah.
And then you're able to deal with, you know, wielding the power that has to offer, okay? Because, you know, you're working with something that is, you know, moving through the very core of your entire being. And that changes who you are. Okay, that's part of evolution and expansion. And then those that are in your world, those that are in the contact that you have, you know, they feel that.
Yeah, because you become illuminated. You're illuminating yourself. And whether you want to talk about the etheric body once again, or self-transformation, like, what do you think you're doing when you're self-transforming or transmutating? You know, there's another esoteric word, the transmutation. And you can think of the law of gender in the Hermetic philosophy, male and female, the male and female principle. They look opposite. Here's male, here's female. And then you have how they're perpetually transmutating, perpetually. Because what we understand is that energy is not created or destroyed. It's everywhere, all at once, in all things, etc. So you've got this male and female energy coming together, and it's perpetually transmutating energy into new things. And I like to almost think of that as the law of correspondence, which is as above, so below, and the miracle of the one thing. You know, and then I like to think of it in terms of vibration. So if you're raising your vibration, when you're battling yourself, your inner demons, with the understanding of, say, the runar, the runes, and you're building and forging that connection with your fetch, you're forging that connection with the deep principles and characteristics of our great heroes that are in the lore, who have, you know, communicated with the gods. And who's to say that you can't communicate with the deeper intrinsic elements of what the gods represent for yourself, and they can you know, be there for you as a standing principle. Like, you know, if you're dealing with a very dark, dangerous aspect of your inner self-transformation, when you like Mjolnir, when you like the power of Thor to help you in that in that experience. Like there's a deep mythology here. There's a deep inner transformation, and the more that you raise your vibration, the more that you conquer your Jotuns, the more that you wake up from the pre-consciousness that is constantly trying to overwhelm you, to grip you, to bind you, to make you a part of its will. When you overcome and you stretch your imagination out, when you understand your inner abilities, because a lot of esoteric workings, it opens up, it awakens these inner abilities that you had no idea were there before. And you start to build a connection with yourself. You start to trust in yourself. You start to become confident because you're dealing now with your fetch. You're forging that connection. You're allowing the marriage to take place. You know, the fear of death is released. There is a deep transformation. To stand in front of a man who does not fear death changes your opinions about death. And this is a lot of the initiatory practices from master to student. And it's been this way since time immemorial for obvious reasons. Because we are an integral people. We are interdependent upon each other. That's the way that it has been. That's the way it will always be. We need each other. And if you look at how our ancestors and a lot of other esoteric occult orders have structured themselves, is we need each other. We need to be able to grow ourselves, to show our descendants these characteristics, what it means to be a man or a woman, what it means to be a sorcerer, or what it means to be the Vidki or the Volva. What does it mean to be in that position of power, the Gothi? What does it mean to be in that position of power? What characteristics, what virtues? How do you ethically go about your life? How are your practices undergone? These things are passed down. They have to be passed down. This is how a tradition survives. And like you were saying, Wilderson, it all comes from the esoteric. It all comes from these deep inner revelations that our ancestors have been having since time immemorial. Written down on cave walls, written down on rock. A lot of it was written down on wood. A lot of that's gone now. We're reviving. We're reviving that esoteric mindset. And it's sitting there in the lore. Is all of the lore academic? Like you were saying, Wilson, no, it's not academic, but it's skaldic. And if you read it in a certain way, it has a transformative effect. It has a visionary effect in your mind for your inner transformation to occur. That's how adept and beautifully smart and creative and intrinsically a part of this whole thing that our ancestors were. And for us to uncover it and to understand it and to share it and to grow within it, shows us that that intrinsic nature is still there. That interdependence is still real. Maybe epigenetics with their DNA being awakened and alivened and being restored in this world, maybe it's real. Maybe open up your mind a little bit to these principles.
And, we do realize that, not everybody, and this is true in the time of our ancestors as well, not everybody is called towards the esoteric. And, that's fine. We're not saying that everybody has to be. But we're saying for those that are, they should not be armchair theorists, but actually get with the program, so to speak, not necessarily anything that we have to say, but what speaks to them and what is going to work with them. I don't come out here as the fount of all wisdom. Absolutely not. I can tell you what's worked for me. What works for you may be slightly different. Okay? However, you have to start somewhere. And the discipline and the practice is important. But this is all intrinsically related to the exoteric or the religious spiritual philosophy, because it wouldn't exist without the esoteric. And if it anything that is just purely exoteric, okay, there's nothing to it at all. All right, even in the religious rites, which is part of the exoteric, okay, when somebody is standing in bloat invoking the gods, they are doing an esoteric act. All right, if they're just sitting there doing that, fulfill something by rote that was done by our ancestors hundreds and thousands of years ago, and we're fulfilling a tradition. Okay, it has about as much value, really, when you think about it, as singing the national anthem at the beginning of a football game. Okay, it may be moving to some people, but that's because they're connecting to something more than just outward words. They're connecting to something inward, and that's an esoteric act.
Yeah, and usually
and when you have somebody that's actually, realizing that, okay, the religious side of things came from the esoteric, and there is a dividing line now, kind of between where one is a little more general. We mentioned this in a very early episode called Religion and Magic, parts 1 and 2. And we talked about, you can find that on YouTube, by the way. We talked about how, on the religious side of things, you have people of various levels of understanding all together at the same time. And how it's all geared that everybody gets a little bit of benefit from it. Okay? Where the esoteric is concerned, there are a lot fewer that are really serious, and they are on a far more progressive and, I would say, a combination between dangerous and very high price path to grow and expand. Okay? And we look at that today, and what I've been talking about, facing one's inner demons, and you'd be surprised at what it is that people have that they have to face. Everybody has something different. Becoming aware through the challenges that are overcome of their soul complex and how to balance that. Okay, becoming aware of their fetch or their higher genius or the will that was the impulse for them to incarnate in the first place. Becoming able to connect with the gods and the goddesses, being able to connect with the runes, being able to connect with the energies of the earth and of the multiverse itself, and to actually cause change to occur in accordance with their will. All right, because there's a lot more than just mysticism and meditation. That's the foundation of things. All right, that's just scratching the surface. For those that have been listening to the Runic series, and those that have been looking at or have used the True Meditation series that we have, that's scratching the surface. That's laying the foundation. Okay, because you can't do anything unless there's a foundation laid. But once the foundation is laid, then you start building your edifice, because you have the awareness there, you have the connection there, you have what you have as tools necessary to begin the construction of something, and specifically that which you incarnated in this world to do. And you have a confidence that comes to you. All right? This stuff is so important for us to remember. So the first thing that we talked about was that, as a reason why we teach the esoteric is that, everything proceeded from it. Secondly, of course, the pathway of evolution on a personal level and how that affects everybody else that's in the collective, which in our case is the Northern European folk soul. Okay? The third and the final point that I want to bring home here on this is that the esoteric is the birthright of our people. All right? Even if I know a great number of people in our folk do not follow it to that degree, it is a birthright that has been given to us. And when we take a look at what's out there today, there are some good things that are out there. Okay? But when you take a look at the majority of the works that are out there that talk about the runes, or that talk about or that talk about this or that, the majority rank and file stuff that you'll find in bookstores, okay, you find it is very pale in comparison with the writings of other traditions on the esoteric side of things. Why? There are not all that many people who are true practitioners of the art. There are not all that many people that will write books about it. There are some, some that I wish hadn't, but there are those that have written some good things too. But, we're looking at something that is being lost because people think in error because somebody wrote something that was not in congruence with the lore and called it Asatruar, or called it something that was related to Asatruar, whether it be esoteric or otherwise, that it's all bad and all to be thrown out. Okay, when you are in a position like we are in, where we have some lore that we have to work with, and a great deal of lore that was destroyed, not as bad as some other traditions, I suppose, but when we take a look at what we have, there has to be exploration and experimentation on the esoteric side by people who have the gumption to go out there and try it. Let me give an example here that's not related to magic at all, but is related to the fact of reconstructing things, okay? You take a look at some of these books on herbology. Okay, this herb heals this disease. This herb does this for your skin. This herb will put you to sleep. This herb will help you with your stuff. Who in the dickens was the one that found that out? Okay? How would you like to have been the one who, I've never seen that herb before, let's eat it and see what happens? Okay? Yeah, I'm sure that's how they found out that monk's hood kills people. Okay? Too much belladonna in the tea. They slept and never woke up. You take a look at that. And there were people that went out and either through instruction from the spirits or through a combination of instruction from the spirits and experimentation came to find out a great deal of things about herbal lore that was a great benefit to their tribe and to their people. And they're finding out today that many of these herbal remedies actually do work. Some of them don't, but, a lot of them do. And, our ancestors, just because they lived in a different era, were not somehow dumb or less intelligent than we are today. The human brain has not changed in its size or capacity in thousands of years. They were just as smart as we are. They just lived in a different time and had a different technology. All right? We have a different focus in Western society, and have had for quite some time, a number of centuries, on the evolution, if you want to call it, of mechanical engineering and of technology, whereas our ancestors were more concerned about how they were going to keep their crops from getting raided by the neighboring village or the neighboring tribe. And so they didn't have a lot of time to think and innovate about a lot of things. But you know what? That's not entirely true, because in the Viking Age, the ships that our ancestors had, which people will look at and scoff at today, some of them, for their time, were the most high-tech ships that there were on the sea. They could float on salt water and then go into a freshwater river and stay floating. Okay? That was something at that time that their enemies had never seen before. Okay? They weren't dumb. Our ancestors were great traders. They went all over the world. They understood the secret of crucible steel. before anybody else in Europe. And then they forgot, but you know, it was something that they had. I believe it was the Uthred sword was a sword if it was the real thing and not a knockoff. You know, you didn't want to get hit with if you were involved in combat, okay? Because that thing was top of the line. All right. You know, we take a look at the things that they did, but how did they reach these conclusions? How did they understand these things? Well, it was, you know, they were not dumb people, and they had the gumption to go and experiment with what needed to be experimented with in order to find out what worked, so that they would have something that was a benefit and an increase to their tribe. Now, in spiritual things, in the esoteric, we're talking about the same type of attitude and the same type of thing. Now, you know what? We're not talking about somebody who goes around and says that, you know, Thor was like he's depicted in Marvel Comics. Okay? Nothing of the sort. What we're talking about is taking the knowledge that we do have from our ancestors, from the rune poems, from those that have heard folklore, from places like the Icelandic Museum of Sorcery, from places where there are actual writings that have been passed down, and putting it all together and figuring out, along with an understanding of the tribal religions of the world and the things that transcend location, as to the goals that they were trying to accomplish in terms of consciousness, and building that which works and it is true to what our ancestors would have done if they were in our place. Do you think that our ancestors, if they were suddenly stripped of everything except the bare bones of what they had and enjoyed as lore and knowledge of the arcane, would have sat on their hands and watched the football game and said, "Oh, it's so sad. I don't know what to do." No, some of them would have maybe, but they would have been, as industrious people, quite honored probably to take up the challenge to figure out how to revive it and revitalize it. And will it be exactly the same as what it was? No. Because nothing from one point in history to the next is ever exactly the same as what preceded it. What we do, do I claim that, the way that we practice rune magic is the exact same way that they used to practice it back in the 9th century? No, it's not. There are some elements that are, but there are also some aspects of it that are very unique to the 21st century in which we live. Would our ancestors have looked down on that? No. Well, some of that's UPG. Well, you know what? Anybody that says anything about the runes that's not actually written in the rune poems is saying something that's UPG. Everything, and this is something that a lot of people forget, everything that our ancestors, the further back you go, created and worked with was UPG to them. So what makes them better than us? Absolutely nothing, except that they're our ancestors. I think that they would be more disappointed in the fact that this generation would be less innovative than theirs. Don't you think so, Tierson?
Yeah, people just have to remember that one day we're going to be ancestors, and if we don't have our own personal gnosis of things for ourselves, and then we're never really going to have anything to pass on. And I don't mean that in the sense that you can't be a good person and you can't live by the 9 noble virtues and the 12 traits, and that you can't live a good life and be honorable. I just mean that if we come from an esoteric tradition, I just feel that some people will, and this has always happened throughout time. It's just beautiful how people are called to these things. Is that if you're studying the esoteric, we're just this show is just to help energize you and to let you know that we come from an esoteric tradition, and we need to keep that alive. We need to keep all aspects of our tradition alive. The esoteric, the exoteric, and we need to have an avenue. And here on Northern Roots Radio, we'd like to open up an avenue for all aspects of that which is Asatruar. So, I hope that everyone's enjoyed this topic today, because like we were mentioning, this all came on a whim, and I think for a really good reason. I'm starting to really understand now, Wodenson, why this episode was very important to be done, and I just hope that our listeners got a lot from it, because just here being on the show, having these things come to me, hearing what you have to say about this topic, I've learned so much, and I could take this energy and I could take it into my practices, I could take it into my readings, and we're here for you, and thanks for listening. And this is Tierson Wodenson. I'll let you take the show out, and we'll catch you next week.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Tierson. This is an important broadcast, and I hope that it's been one that's been intelligible. And, there's going to be some people that disagree with what we're talking about, and, that's okay, because we're not asking you to agree. What we are asking, and the only thing that we have ever asked of any of our listeners, is that they have an open mind. You have to decide for yourself what is going to be the avenue through which you follow the path that's put before you. I can't tell you that. Don't take my word and go following that. You have to, hopefully be activated somehow through hearing broadcasts like this to search things out yourself. Okay? We live in such an information-rich society that you can look at things yourself. And, see, if the words that I'm saying are true. Look inside your heart. And what you feel inside your heart. And tell me what you feel is true and what is not. When you've sat down with somebody you don't know, you often get a feeling about them. Sometimes you think, oh boy, this is a scoundrel. And you find out later that was true. Another time you might sit down with somebody you've never met before and you click with them just like that, and it's like you've known each other all your lives. How did you know that? That was a deep intuitive sense. And you know what? When you're listening to people talk and you're listening to things that are going on, whether it be through radio stations or podcast stations like this one, or whether it's your face-to-face conversations with people, you do sense that. And it's when you go against that oftentimes we get ourselves into trouble. I'm not asking you to take my word for anything. What I ask is that you have an open mind and that you search things out and that you read the stories for yourself, that you read the lore for yourself, that you don't sit and only take the opinions of people who set themselves up as authorities, okay, no matter what level of education they have. You know what? My doctor sometimes has misdiagnosed me, and he went to school for 13 years. Just because you're educated doesn't mean you're always right. Just because you're uneducated doesn't mean you're always wrong. Okay? There's a balance there. And show respect where respect is due, but look at things yourself. Don't just go on what other people say or listen to part of a conversation and then make a judgment based on some word that was said, but you didn't hear the whole thing. Actually engage. Actually engage. And engage the lore. Engage the sagas. Engage the Eddas. Engage the different books that are written. And you know what? You can tell when you're reading some of the books which ones are garbage and which ones aren't. Okay, especially if you've been reading the lore, especially when you've been reading the sagas. Okay, it is our hope and our desire that you're going to be moved to study these things yourself. And where it comes to the esoteric, that's the same thing. That's your birthright. If you feel that that's the path that you need to be on, then that you will seek it out, that you will not take no for an answer, that you will not give up. Challenges will definitely come your way, and things that you might wonder how in the world you're going to get past. But you know what? It's worth it all. It's worth it all. All right? Because of the fact that that expansion in consciousness, you know, to open your eyes in the morning and not fear death, and not even have an inkling of worry about anything that's really going on in your life or what challenges that you may face, because you already know deep within you that you have what it takes. You know, you have the tools inside of you to deal with it. You know, so many challenges face people. You know, I'm moved by so many who have overcome so many obstacles, and yet they are still fulfilling their purpose on this world. You know, so we need to, you know, be that type of a mentality as a people, and I'm hoping that this broadcast helps to bring that about, and other broadcasts that we've done as well. You can find us on northernrunesradio.com. Just type in as well on Facebook if you want to connect with us there. Just type Northern Runes Radio into the search feature of Facebook. And we appreciate everyone there. We're also on Google+. We're on Twitter. We're on a new platform called TSU. That's TSU. We're also just about everywhere else. We have a YouTube channel, and you'll see posts if you're on Facebook with links to that. And we want you to, you know, just engage and to be moved to study things for yourself and to understand for yourself that you'll be that motivated to do that. Hail to you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day or out of your evening to listen to this broadcast, and may it be something that speaks to your soul. Those 3 reasons. All right? Everything is proceeded from the esoteric, number 1. 2, the personal evolution that is brought about by the esoteric. And number 3, the birthright of our people not to lose the esoteric. Hail to each and every one of you. We'll be back next Tuesday. Until next time.